A recent article by Ranker stated that American football is the most popular sport in the United States of America. When one sits and considers this, it really is not shocking. After all, the Super Bowl is always the most watched sporting event in the country, and each weekend in the fall, hundreds of thousands of Americans flock to watch their home state's pro team, their favorite collegiate team, or their local high school football team play the sport that is loved by a nation. However, living in the Southeast, one version of football reigns supreme to the others, and that is college football. In this documentary, we will track the history of college football. We will cover the birth of the sport, the many changes of its equipment and rules, and its popularity and culture over the course of the past century and a half. Moreover, we will see how humble beginnings propelled college football into the American public quicker than any other sport. Football itself started as a game played in America's backyards originally before athletic clubs began to take notice. Seen as a mix of soccer and rugby, the sport's popularity soared in the 1850s and 1860s. The first college football game ever played was 150 years ago this fall, taking place 23 years before the first professional football game. On November 6, 1869, Princeton traveled upstate to Rutgers to take part in the first ever collegiate football game. The sport kicked off with humble beginnings to say the least. Each team had 25 players wearing whatever clothes they preferred. 100 fans were in attendance to watch the sport that mirrored rugby rules. At the end of the game, Rutgers outlasted Princeton 6-4. Although this was sloppy, unorganized defensive struggle played on a plot of ground on the Rutgers University campus, it serves as a starting point for one of the most prominent sports in the U.S. Naturally, as time progressed, the equipment and rules of college football were altered. Starting with the equipment, a helmet was not even introduced to the football world until 1896. The starter helmets were made of moleskin or leather and provided basically no protection in comparison to today's helmets. Shortly after the turn of the 20th century, tougher leather helmets were created that helped cover ears. Plastic helmets showed up around 1939. Following the conception of these plastic helmets, more innovations improved the face mask, outer shell, and the inside padding of the helmet. Shoulder pads initially were sources of ridicule to college football players. However, they started to pick up popularity for cautionary reasons in 1950. They started out being made of leather, but later evolved to plastic and foam. In 2002, many colleges started experimenting by making these pads lighter and more breathable by using synthetic fibers produced by NASA. These are the football pads used by all colleges in this day and age of collegiate football. In fact, the University of Florida founded a system to pump cold air into the pads on the sidelines, giving players an air-conditioned feeling between drives. Like the players' pads and helmets, the football has changed much over the course of the past 150 years as well. The first game played between Princeton and Rutgers used a rubber soccer ball as the football. A rubber-covered rugby ball was introduced. The football that fans are used to seeing today did not find its way into the college football universe until 1912, when tests were done to find the best measurements to make a lightweight and compact football that was unique. Small measurement alterations continued into the 1980s. In 1956, a rule was created that a rubber-covered ball would be permitted, but this changed in 1993 when they were deemed illegal. Therefore, this brings us to the rules aspect of how the game has changed. Originally, all scores counted as 1 point. In 1883, scores were up to 4 points, and it wasn't until 1912 that a touchdown was considered 6 points, and in 1958 it was established that 1 and 2 point conversions were to be attempted from the 3-yard line. The football field has also had many changes, with the uprights being moved to the correct place in 1991 and hash marks finally being placed in their traditional spots in 1993. Initially, teams were allowed 25 players. That number dropped to 20 in 1873, 15 in 1876, and 11 in 1880. More rules continued being introduced, such as 7 players being required on the line starting in 1910, and the prohibition of hiding the ball behind a player's jersey began in the 1911 season. Face masks were deemed legal by the NCAA in 1951. Many of these rule changes were introduced by legendary player and coach John Heisman. His greatest contribution, he felt, was the invention of the forward pass. It became legalized in 1906 and forever changed the game of football, both for amateurs and professionals. More rules such as clipping, holding, and pass interference were defined in the 20th century, attempting to make a popular growing sport more fair. Speaking of the sport's popularity, as more colleges began to play football, more people began to take notice. In the late 1800s, the media began to create heroes out of athletes and coaches such as Yale's Walter Camp, Chicago's Amos Alonzo Stagg, and Wisconsin's Pat O'Day. This heroism piqued the public's interest and started to make college football as a modern entertainment industry. Television networks quickly began to take notice, with the first televised college football game taking place between Fordham and Waynesburg in 1939. By 1960, it was common to see every major college football game broadcast at least regionally each Saturday. As more people were exposed to the sport, its fan base grew larger and larger. Despite the sport's humble beginnings, over time it soared to the most popular sport in America. Looking back at the recent history of college football, many events come to mind. Texas quarterback Vince Young dances into the end zone to beat USC in the 2006 Rose Bowl. Cam Newton leads Auburn to a win in the 2011 national title game over Oregon. Alabama wins back-to-back national championships in 2011 and 2012. Auburn ends their title streak thanks to the 2013 kick six. And sorry, Georgia fans, but 2nd and 26, much like these iconic games and plays, will live on in college football lore forever. However, none of this would be possible without the unlikely upcoming of college football. It all started on a November day in Piscataway, New Jersey, and then over time evolved into the mega sport it is today. This did not occur overnight. It took centuries of trial and error, rule changes, equipment alterations, and media exposure. However, in the end, all these occurrences helped to create college football into the success it is today, but it all spawned from its humble beginnings. And there's no doubt that no sport has come to the front of the American public quicker than college football.